are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Hello, and welcome to MidSouth Matters on Germantown Municipal Television. I'm your host, Ruth Dunning. MidSouth Matters endeavors to bring you insightful interviews with influential community members about topics that matter to you. On today's show, senior editor from the Memphis Flyer, Jackson Baker, returns to the show to update us on the political events in the Mid-South. We will also discuss how the recent national elections affect us in the Memphis area. In addition to his role as senior editor at the Memphis Flyer, Jackson is also a contributing editor of Memphis Magazine and the Tennessee Journal. His primary concerns are political coverage and general news. Other duties include editorials, op-ed contributions, and the paper's online edition. He's worked as a reporter for the Arkansas Gazette, where he was twice jailed for refusing to reveal his sources to a grand jury, and as an aide in the U.S. House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Jackson. I'm thrilled that you're back. You're one of our very favorites of all time to have on this show. I did not know that you had been jailed twice.
Oh, yes. It was for the same offense. And you want the background,
I do,
don't you?
I do.
Back in, I'm not going to give you the date, it'll date me, but back a few decades ago when I worked for the Arkansas Gazette in Little Rock, there were attempts to pass a legalized gambling bill in the legislature. And I found out because a couple of the representatives told me that they had been offered bribes to vote for that bill, significant bribes, $1,000, which in today's money would be a lot more. And so I wrote a story about it. Simultaneously, behind me, but a day or so later, a reporter for the Pine Bluff Commercial wrote a story, talking to a couple of the same people. And the grand jury called in, they called a grand jury investigation of the matter. And I became a witness, as did the other reporter from the Pine Bluff Commercial. They asked me how I got my story, and I told them. And they asked me who gave me information, and I told them one of the names because he put his name on the record. And was asked, is there anyone else who gave you information about these bribes being passed in the legislature? And I said, yes. Pregnant pause. And they asked me what the name was, and I said, I am obliged to maintain confidentiality because that's how I secured the information, and I have to honor that pledge. And that got me in jail.
How long did you have to stay in jail?
In that occasion, about 2 days. And it wasn't so bad, except that, and the other reporter went through the same rigmarole. We were in the cell together with a convicted cop murderer.
Oh dear.
Yeah, he was a nice guy, actually, all things considered. And we felt fairly safe because the news media in Little Rock were all over us, and so nobody was going to take the risk of messing with us. We didn't think. We hope not. So we got out of jail finally because the second source revealed himself, and so we could say yes. We could go back to the grand jury and say it was so and so. Except that the judge had become very vexed with us for making him go to the trouble of putting us in jail. So on some technicality, he put us back in. So we spent another night in jail. And after we'd suffered another night, in this case, it was in some common cell area with every known kind of felon. And again, we got along with those guys too. And one thing I found is they were all innocent.
Of course, right.
They would brag about some of their crimes, whether counterfeiting or burglary or armed robbery, whatever it was. They would full of daring do. But the one they were in there for, they didn't do that one. And that was an interesting experience, but that's what happened. That's what happened.
Well, today, journalists now, and journalism in general, is now in the news again. Do you have any hints for the general public on how to tell a real news story from a fake news story, how alternative facts can be detected from facts.
That expression, alternative facts, is going to be with us for a while, I think, from Kellyanne Conway. It's not all that easy. Now, I can only tell you from the point of view of practicing journalists, and that is, if you have a story and there are X number of facts, you try to get confirmation of those facts from at least two sources, more if possible. And you try to get those sources on the record. Again, in the case we just discussed that got me thrown in jail, I had one source on the record and one who was not on the record but was there in case we got thrown in jail and he came forth. And you try to be certain of your sources to begin with. And you try, hopefully, to develop a reputation for accuracy and fidelity to truth. And I think the major papers in the United States, like the New York Times and the Washington Post, there's a lot of shrinkage going on with newspapers right now. But I think the Times is going to be with us for a while. The Washington Post is going to be with us for a while. The major networks are probably going to be with us for a while. And I think those are fairly trustworthy sources because they have a track record. They have very rarely been found finagling the news. Now, we have a president right now that accuses him of finagling the news every time they say something he doesn't like. What the president is doing, Mr. Trump, is he's going around the news media, both in disseminating information and appealing for reaction from people out there in the crowd. And he will tweet, whether it has anything to do with the truth or not. And there are no sources for that. There are no sources for his claim that President Obama wiretapped him. Absolutely none. And in the meantime, he is absolutely stymieing all requests from the news media to find out what does this think he has for Russia and Vladimir Putin. Well, those are issues that some of our viewers, I know, will say, well, so what? He's got a right to maintain. Okay. But how can you tell what the difference between what a news medium says and what a public figure says? The news medium will usually cite evidence that can be investigated on its own. So the reader can take, say, an article or something that's been on television or even something that's been disseminated in social media, and there's enough there you can check it out. And generally, again, there's multiple confirmation. Look for multiple confirmation. Look for sources that are named. And that's your best key. And look for sources you trust.
It's difficult if you are part of the White House team and you're leaking. That source isn't going to be mentioned, by name. If they're a good source, they're not going to. Yeah,
and again, I have run afoul of that in the case I discussed. There are people who want to give you information but don't want to be identified, and you have to. They are part and parcel of the process of disseminating news. Every time you see a big revelation, whether it's Watergate or some lesser public offense, there's a leak involved. Because reporters just don't go into public records and spend all day, I found something here. That is very rare. Generally speaking, it's someone who is in a position to know who's actually involved with a governmental source, and he'll tell you, and hopefully supply you with documents so you can prove it. So you can't 100% inoculate yourself against doubt, because you have to a certain extent depend on that kind of source.
Right. Well, next thing I'm going to ask you about gets us a little closer to home with District 95 and the voucher system in Tennessee. And I'm going to let you start now, and then we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and really get into it. So set it up for us.
I'm going to tell you something. You live in District 95, don't you?
I did for years and years and years.
You don't now?
I do not now.
I was going to nominate you to fill that vacancy.
Well, I'll move back, just in case.
The vacancy of State Representative Mark Lovell, who was just elected last year, served, I think, 45 days.
And that's where we stop.
Okay.
We'll be back.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah, right. We have to take a short break. When we return, we'll talk more with Jackson Baker. Please stay with us.
It's a short ride from your neighborhood to your naturehood. To find a neighborhood park or green space near you, visit discovertheforest.org.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back to MidSouth Matters. I'm your host, Ruth Dunning. With me is Jackson Baker of the Memphis Flyer. We're talking about the state of politics here in the Memphis area. And we're back to the voucher system and the situation in Memphis.
I think we were going to talk about District 95. We'll get into the voucher system.
Yeah, it leads into it.
And I'll even go back a little bit to the conversation we were having before the break, because you had asked me how was it possible for a citizen to determine what is true and false in the media and so forth. And it just occurred to me during the break, Pontius Pilate asked that question, what is truth? It's one of the great unanswerable questions. You can't 100% generally pin something down. So you have to have relationships of trust. Now, District 95. District 95 has had an unhappy history for its for the people in that seat. This is the State House of Representatives, covering Germantown and Colleyville. Because Curry Todd, who had represented the district for a long time, was turned out last summer in the Republican primary for that seat by Mark Lovell. Because Curry had some difficulties, he had DUI conviction and that sort of thing. And Mark Lovell was the new broom. He was coming in and started a whole new chapter, except he ran afoul of things too, because he had been in office for 45 days and he was alleged to have committed some sexual misconduct up in Nashville, which has happened up there once in a while. And these days they try to catch people doing it. And he resigned at their request, at the request of his Republican leadership, creating a vacancy. So that right now it is up to the Shelby County Commission to appoint a successor to Mark Lovell. Now, by the time they could go through the process of advertising the position, interviewing candidates, and finally selecting one to go up there, the earliest they could get someone on the job would be April the 4th, at which time there might be 2 weeks left in the session.
I was going to say, that's, you'd hardly get
But
in.
they were still taking some pains to get that done, because this commission, Republicans and Democrats, outer county and city, everybody on it was opposed to school vouchers. The people in the city were opposed because they felt that taking money out of the Shelby County schools, which is now the Memphis City system, would make it difficult for that system to operate efficiently. And the people in the suburbs, Germantown, Colleyville, et cetera, have just set up these bright, shiny new municipal systems, which are also public schools. They didn't want any of their money to be tapped for private institutions either. So 13 people all voted unanimously to oppose vouchers. That was their compelling reason to get someone appointed to get up to Nashville, because that generally has been, in previous years, the last major thing to be voted on, school vouchers. And it's going to be voted again. It's going to be a very close vote. Brian Kelsey, by the way, who represents this area, I think, state senator, is the primary sponsor of that. So that was where they were until the Democrats of Shelby County, who have had hard luck in recent years, they've just about evaporated as a political force. The Shelby County Democratic Party, the official party, did evaporate. It was decertified by the state Democrats. They're trying to recreate themselves, and they're trying to get back into the game in a big way and reinforce their numbers and their reputation somehow. So someone got the bright idea of appointing using the fact that there are 7 Democrats on the Shelby County Commission and 6 Republicans, giving them a majority. If they could get all 7 Democrats to vote for one of their own, a Democrat, and send that person to Nashville for that 2-week period to vote against vouchers, which everybody wanted done, then they would kill 2 birds, except the Republicans were offended by this, because their sense of things is that, look, we should appoint someone who represents the politics of the district, even for the 2-week period.
Isn't that kind of a gentleman's agreement?
Yes, a gentleman's agreement has existed for as long as there's been partisan elections in these parts. And I think the case can be made that what the Democrats had in mind, I understand why they want to do this, but I don't think sending someone out there for 2 weeks and realizing there's going to be a special election too to fill the term permanently, no Democrat's going to win then. I mean, I can tell you that. That's not going to happen. Not in District 95. So what is really gained by that? In the meantime, the very idea of putting forth that idea has created some tensions between the two parties on the commission, which none existed before. They've been getting along swimmingly. Now, I don't think all the Democrats are behind this ploy, by the way, so that it may die of its own weight. But if the Democrats should insist on that, then the Republicans will probably find a way to scuttle the idea of appointing anybody at all. That's what's at issue right now. They come back on March the 20th and they decide whether they want to quickly run through this process of nominating someone. And if they run into a partisan head-on collision, they'll probably not nominate anybody. And consequently, the issue of vouchers, which a lot of people take very seriously, both pro and con, will be lacking that vote from District 95. From Shelby County, one vote missing, and that could be the difference in the outcome, because everybody knows it's going to be a razor-thin margin. So it's very crucial, and frankly, I know I'm going to annoy some of my Democratic friends, but I'm thinking this is not the time, it's not the way in which to make the case for the Democratic Party. Right. They really should honor the gentleman's agreement. And I'm not sure, when are we going to be seen in this program? I hope it's going to be resolved maybe by then, I don't know.
No, it should be seen before
okay,
then.
Well, that's my recommendation.
Okay, very good. Anything else about the school vouchers that we need to talk about?
Well, the case for school vouchers is that there are, and John DeBerry, who is an inner city Memphis Democrat, he's someone for them. Most inner city Memphis Democrats are not. He is. And he made the case yesterday in an interview that it's just another tool in the toolbox, he says, because you've got people who are capable of excellent schoolwork, and they're locked into these bad schools because of the way people are assigned to schools, and they would have trouble financing themselves to make a leap somewhere else. This gives them a break, and he tried to make the case that it wouldn't take that much money out of the public school system. Opponents say yes, it would, and it's the beginning of a slippery slope that would undermine the very nature of public education. So it's a fundamental choice they're making.
Yeah, it really is. From what I understand, $4,000 is about the maximum.
$7,000.
$7,000, is it? Well, that may not be enough.
That's still not going to get you in a lot of places.
Yeah. And that's all the time we have. It really has gone.
That's it?
For this segment.
All right.
Yeah. We need to take another short break. More with Jackson Baker when we return.
A full life, measured in seats, starts with the right ones early on. Car crashes are a leading killer of children 1 to 13. Learn how to prevent deaths and injuries by using the right car seat for your child's age and size.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Okay.
We're back on MidSouth Matters. Joining me again is Jackson Baker. And this time we want to move to at least one of the, or two now, of the president's executive orders dealing with immigration. How is that affecting Memphis and people who are here and et cetera?
Well, now, as we speak, the president has issued a second version of his ban on travel from
Right.
6 countries rather than the original 7.
7.
Iraq is now out of the balance. But I personally, I know there must be other differences. I don't know what they are, because it still seems to me this is a backdoor way of keeping Muslims from getting into the United
Right.
States.
There's a difference if you already had a green card.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah, I guess there's
you can still immigrate.
There's a
yes.
difference. And at the time of his first ban, which was overturned by the courts, and which had one additional country, Iraq, involved, I talked to a couple of immigration lawyers here in Shelby County, and they told me that while their own practices had not suffered greatly yet, they would in time, but more importantly than that, there would be people stranded out of the country, away from their families, away from their jobs. A lot of medical people come here from those countries.
Right.
On that list. And by the way, that list, none of the crimes, the massacres, the terrorist attacks or what have you, have been committed by people from those countries.
Right.
Most of them came from our great all Saudi Arabia, in fact.
Or they were born in the United States.
Yeah, or they're native born. But in any case, all kinds of reputable, upstanding people, credits to our society, and parts of the engine of society would be trapped and snafu'd by this ban. And it still will by the second ban in some ways. And I think the real issue is you can't really disguise the fact that it's aimed at Muslims, however you construe it. It is aimed at Muslims. The only way we can defeat the Islamic radicals, ISIS and so forth, is by having good relations with other Muslims, mainstream Muslims. And if they get the idea that we just don't like Muslims at all, we don't let them in our country, we're not going to be able to do that.
Now, the State Department says it's the best recruiting tool ISIS has had.
Yeah. And it really makes no sense from that point of view, but it has local impact because medical people in particular are going to be affected by it. And families, because there's a lot of back and forth between Memphis and other parts of the world. And the other issue you want to talk about, not besides immigration, was
The book.
No, the Affordable Care Act.
Yes, the Affordable Care Act, and how that's going to affect Memphis.
Well,
or Tennessee in general.
Yeah, I think Tennessee has been. First of all, I have to remind people, the Affordable Care Act has been opposed by the Republicans in Congress and the Republicans in the state of Tennessee legislature, mainly because they were calling it Obamacare. If it suddenly was the same thing, every jot and tittle was called Trump Care, they'd let it through now.
Well, that's what happened in Kentucky.
Yeah.
With KY Care.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's just the Affordable Care Act.
And Governor Haslam, because we have some hospitals in Tennessee that are in desperate financial straits and needed some of the Medicaid expansion money that we turned down. The legislature forced Governor Haslam not to employ. He came up with a fairly useful scheme called Insure Tennessee. It was not called Obamacare, but they still pinned the label of Obamacare on it, and because it had that taint as far as they could see, they kept turning it down. But they kept saying, well, if we ever get a Republican president, we'll get the same money in block grants, except what we learned from the changes that are being proposed in the Affordable Care Act, or to replace the Affordable Care Act, will basically obliterate those Medicaid expansion funds. We don't get anything. And the hospitals will still be suffering, and patients will still be suffering. And it's a shame because partisanship interfered in something that should never have had anything to do with partisanship. Same thing I was talking about with relation to the county commission. Sometimes partisanship wrecks real progress.
Well, it did. In fact, Obamacare was initially proposed by Republicans, and Massachusetts in
Romney.
Yeah.
And you wanted to talk about the book, and you mean the book by my friend Otis Sanford.
I do. And we have a couple minutes left if you want to say a kind word or two.
Yeah, and the title of that is From Boss Crump to King Willie. Otis Sanford, who's former managing editor of the Commercial Appeal and now has the journalistic chair of excellence at the University of Memphis, and does TV commentary. We all see him do that. He's a very good writer and a very good historian. That's a wonderful book. I'm reviewing it for the Memphis Flyer. And it reads like a novel, and it has all kinds of nuggets in it about Memphis history, particularly Memphis history affecting the races. And it's written but it's written again from the point of view of a narrative that moves right along, and the facts are gained while you're having a good time with it. So I'm touting that book, is what it comes down to.
Tell us some interesting facts you've gleaned from it.
That, I just started reading it in preparatory to review, but one of the first things that's in the book is about a newsboy who was peddling papers, extras, out on the streets announcing that Crump had died. That was me. I'm a character in that book, briefly. But no, seriously, and it has certain things about, the book is starting with the end of Crump's life and how he was assuring people he was just fine and he was in the hospital and I'm doing fine, and visitors believing he was not doing fine. But he was a great presence, and he changed the history of Memphis, and the absence of Crump has changed the way Memphis deals with Nashville, for the worse for the most part. That's all in the book.
Very good. So Boss Trump was not a boss in what we think of as a political boss.
Oh yes, he was. Yes, he was. You didn't own a political office unless he said you could. But the thing is, he was as political bosses go, he was not financially corrupt. He wanted power, but he exercised power as he thought in a benevolent way, and for the most part toward good ends. But he was a political boss in the truest sense. Yeah. There was not a true democracy in that sense.
In that sense. The other thing is, when was the last time you ever saw a newspaper extra?
Probably back then when I was peddling one.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. That's all we have time for on this edition of MidSouth Matters. I'd like to thank my guest for taking time out of his day to be on the show, and you, the viewer, for watching. If you would like more information about this or any other show on Germantown Municipal Television, please visit our website at www.gmtvonline.org. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you'll join us next time on MidSouth Matters.